Why Nations Fail by Acemoglu and Robinson. Summary of Chapter 3: The Making of Prosperity and Poverty, the Economics of the 38th Parallel. Authors are of the view how prosperity and poverty are determined by the incentives created by institutions, and how politics determines what institutions a nation has. They explain the making of prosperity and poverty in the 38th Parallel. Collapse of Japan's Korean colony. Japan's Korean colony collapsed in 1945, dividing the country into South and North. North Korea invaded South in 1950, causing tension and separating Won Pyong-won and his brother. Living standards in North Korea. North Korea's living standards are comparable to Portugal and Spain, while South Korea's are akin to sub-Saharan African countries. North Koreans' health is worse, with the average North Korean expected to live 10 years less than their cousins south of the 38th parallel. Economic gap between Koreas. South Korea was led by anti-communist Syngman Rhee, supported by the US, and governed a market economy. North Korea's economic fortunes diverged due to the failure of Kim Il-sung's command economy and the JIT system. Despite the failure to reform the system, North Korea continues to stagnate economically. South Korea encouraged investment and trade, achieved high literacy rates, and became one of East Asia's miracle economies. Extractive and inclusive economic institutions. Economic institutions in North and South Korea. North Korea's economic success influenced by different institutions, rules, and incentives. Growing up in poverty, lack of entrepreneurial initiative, and limited education. Fear of lack of property ownership, business opportunities, and legal market access. South Korea's market economy based on private property, allowing for entrepreneurial success and improved living standards. State supports economic activity, allowing entrepreneurs to borrow money, foreign companies to partner, and individuals to take up mortgages. Inclusive economic institutions encourage participation and enable individuals to make their own choices. Inclusive economic institutions and private property rights. Inclusive economic institutions promote economic activity, productivity growth, and prosperity. Secure private property rights are crucial for these institutions, as only those with such rights are willing to invest and increase productivity. The state is intertwined with economic institutions, acting as the enforcer of law, private property, and contracts, and often as a key provider of public services. North Korea and colonial Latin America lack these properties, with private property non-existent in North Korea and insecure property of indigenous peoples in colonial Latin America. Both societies were subject to mass coercion and the state's power to provide key public services. Engines of prosperity, inclusive economic institutions and entrepreneurship. Inclusive economic institutions create equal markets for vocation pursuit. These markets provide a level playing field, enabling individuals to start businesses and increase productivity. Inclusive markets coerce the majority, limiting occupation choices and talent utilization. Technology, education, and workforce education. Technological advancements drive economic growth and productivity. Thomas Edison's application of science to profitable businesses exemplifies these improvements. Economic institutions that foster private property, contracts, and a level playing field are crucial for innovation. Workforce education and skills are closely linked to technology. Economic institutions that create a level playing field are essential for technological change. Low education levels in poor countries are often due to insufficient government support and parental wishes. Economic institutions must foster inclusive markets, encourage technological innovation, invest in people, and mobilize talents for economic growth. Extractive and inclusive political institutions. Political institutions and economic institutions. Economic institutions are shaped by society, with North Korea's economic institutions influenced by communists and colonial Latin Americas by Spanish conquistadors. Political institutions govern incentives, government selection, and the right to do what. Absolutist institutions, like those in North Korea and colonial Latin America, allow power holders to enrich themselves at the expense of society. Pluralistic institutions distribute power broadly and subject it to constraints, forming a broad coalition. Inclusive institutions are centralized and pluralistic, while extractive institutions concentrate power in the hands of a narrow elite. Inclusive institutions would uproot economic institutions that expropriate resources, erect entry barriers, and suppress market functioning for only a few. Synergy of extractive and inclusive institutions. Extractive economic and political institutions create a feedback loop. Political institutions allow elites to structure future institutions. Extractive economic institutions enrich elites, consolidating political dominance. Resources generated by these institutions enable elites to build armies and security forces. Extractive political institutions incentivize newcomers to maintain existing institutions. Inclusive political institutions distribute power broadly, constraining its arbitrary exercise. Inclusive economic institutions reduce benefits enjoyed by elites by ruling over extractive institutions. The importance of economic institutions in creating prosperity. Economic and political institutions can be inclusive or extractive, promoting or hindering economic growth. Nations often fail due to extractive institutions and political institutions that impede economic growth. The politics of institutions is crucial in understanding the reasons for nations' success and failure. Economic institutions that encourage growth can redistribute income and power, potentially worsening the situation for those with political power. Disputes and conflicts over economic institutions are inevitable, as different institutions have different consequences for a nation's prosperity and power distribution. Fear of creative destruction often drives opposition to inclusive economic and political institutions. European history, consequences of creative destruction. Industrialization led to resource loss, reduced land rents, and increased wages for landowners. The spread of industrialization threatened the aristocracy's economic and political power. Powerful groups often oppose economic progress and prosperity engines. Conflict over scarce resources, income, and power leads to conflict over economic institutions. The logic of why the powerful would not want to set up economic institutions extends to the choice of political institutions. Political centralization and its barriers. Centralized state institutions can lead to economic benefits and wealth accumulation for one clan. Fear from change is the main barrier to political centralization. Centralization can lead to lack of law and order and potential opposition from other clans. In Somalia, power is evenly balanced, preventing one clan from imposing its will on others. The long agony/suffering of the Congo. Congo's economic institutions were characterized by miserable poverty due to the extractive nature of the country's economy. The wealth of the elite was based on slave plantations and extraction of taxes from the rest of the country. The government provided very few public services to its citizens, including secure property rights and law and order. The institution of slavery limited the choice of occupation or jobs. Long-distance trade and mercantile activities were controlled by the king and were only open to those associated with him. Limitations of economic growth. The absolutist institutions of Congo were kept in place by the army, preventing sustained economic growth. Reforming economic institutions to improve individual property rights would have made the Congolese society at large more prosperous. The poor state of Congo, a historical perspective. The interaction of economic and political institutions 500 years ago is crucial in understanding the current state of Congo. The national state, run from Kinshasa, had little control over the country, leading to a lack of political centralization. The modern Democratic Republic of Congo remains poor due to the lack of economic institutions that create basic incentives for prosperity. Growth under extractive political institutions. Extractive institutions and economic growth. Economic growth and prosperity are linked to inclusive economic and political institutions. Extractive institutions often lead to stagnation and poverty. Two ways growth under extractive institutions can emerge. Elites can directly allocate resources to high productivity activities they control. Examples include the Caribbean islands and Soviet Union. The development of inclusive economic institutions can occur when the elite monopolizes power. South Korea's transition to inclusive institutions. South Korea transitioned from extractive political institutions to inclusive institutions in the 1980s. The transition was due to the absence of extractive economic institutions. Soviet Union's economic growth. No transition to inclusive political institutions occurred in the Soviet Union, leading to the collapse of the economy in the 1980s and 1990s. Chinese economic growth. Despite rapid growth, China's economic institutions remain extractive, under state control. Political centralization and economic growth. Without it, the state cannot coordinate economic activity and channel resources towards high productivity areas. Extractive institutions usually do not generate sustained economic growth. The arrangements supporting economic growth under extractive institutions are fragile and can collapse or be destroyed by infighting. Thank you.